put your financing management on autopilot mode through the platform, and we will take care of the rest. That's pretty much what we do. So we've got our own internal complexities in our operations, and through Currencycloud, we've automated those operations. I think we've reduced our cost of operation, in no exaggeration, about 98%. And at some point we said, well, if we are taking advantage of the service, why don't we pass it on to the benefit of our clients, right? If the needs are multi-currency or cross-border, our lending solution needs to be cross-border, obviously. When you work at a bank, things work, right? And you execute. When you work at a startup, it's not that like things don't work, it's that they simply don't exist. You first need to develop them, and then you need to make them work.
I was living in Hong Kong when I got my first royalty check for Draken, my pulpy action adventure novel, which is still available as a free download on Amazon and for a small fee in other formats. That check was written in US dollars, about 120 of them. We're not talking Stephen King numbers, I'm afraid. Now, the Hong Kong dollar is pegged to the US dollar at about 7.5 to 1. So that 120 US dollars should have netted me about 900 Hong Kong dollars. And yet, by the time the various commissions and fees and exchange rate differentials had been taken out of that transaction, I don't think I saw 700. It wasn't an issue for me because writing Draken, again, available as a free download on Amazon, was a hobby, published for the experience of doing so, rather than any expectation of income. But that's no way to run a business. Welcome to How to Lend Money to Strangers with Brendan Lagrange. Jorge Juttner, Head of Business Development at Ritmo. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, and good morning.
Jorge, you've got a strong background in investment banking, both in terms of your education and your early career, before you pivoted to join a months-old startup. So let's follow that same path here in the introduction.
I think I was as lost as anyone at the age of 15 to 20. But I was lucky enough to have very good teachers in high school in economics. And I always had sort of a genuine interest in all money-related matters. So I went in to study economics. And then throughout the university, it came clear that I could do three things: either teach, go into policy making as an economist, or into banking. And back then, I had a need to pay bills. So I decided to go into banking. It was sort of a natural step after my bachelor, after my CFA.
Well, you've even mentioned there, a natural step, but you had this very strong corporate resume in your pocket. But instead of going off to join one of the other big international brands that no doubt would have snapped you up, you joined Ritmo, and it was only 2 or 3 months old at the time. So that leads me to two overlapping questions. One, who is Ritmo very quickly, but then also, you joined in those very earliest days of the business, really of the idea, I suppose. So what excited you enough to say, I'm going to take this leap of faith?
I promised my boss that I wouldn't join another bank. I worked for JP Morgan, which I still consider to be the best bank in the world. And I was quite happy there. So I wouldn't join anyone else. But one of the senior bankers I used to work with was a founder at Ritmo. So he left the bank to launch the business. And I felt, why not give it a chance to actually be at the forefront of changing finance, right? I mean, you're single, you don't have a family, you don't have a mortgage, and you've got a chance to contribute to the development of finance from the core. So why not do it, right? And so I decided to leave. And what does Ritmo actually do? So it was born as a classic revenue-based financing platform, as was the case with many other players around the time that we were born, just given that rates were ultra low. We have since then pivoted to an alternative lending platform for SMEs. So that includes online and offline retailers, but also or other type of SME businesses. And it's an alternative lending platform. So we provide credit in a more flexible way than traditional finance providers do. And we try to do so with a technological approach and with a digital process.
When you made that move, What did it feel like when you were on the ground and in the startup, maybe a few months in and you've had a time to settle? How was the experience of being in those early stages of the business versus your days at JP Morgan?
I mean, it's exciting. It's exciting to be on the ground, developing things from scratch. You develop creativity. You are constantly facing challenges that you are not prepared for and that nobody in your organization is prepared for or has thought of before, right? So that's fun, I guess, if you like those challenges and overcome the friction. And then it really comes down to your personality, right? It's less secure, but at the same time, you feel a lot more ownership. When you achieve things, you've got a much stronger sense of pride and success than when doing so in a bank where you're actually achieving success for someone else. Quite different, both interesting, but quite different, yeah.
Yeah, and obviously that doesn't always work out, but with Ritmo, it seems to be working out really, really well. In the 2 years since you've joined, it's generated significant growth, awards and plaudits. And I've seen in some of these articles, Ritmo described as the financial ally of digital companies in phases of growth. Financial ally doesn't always mean lending, but obviously lending is a big part of that. So you gave us a little taster, but let's return to that. And where does lending fit into the current version of the Ritmo business? And who and how are you doing that lending work?
When we speak about success, we changed our focus about a year and a half ago towards the platform concept. And that was a big shift, right? Because all alternative lending platforms were profitable when rates were at zero. The minute they started to go up, most of them are going bust. The reason I think that we are not is, and obviously we didn't do this anticipating that this was going to happen, but rather it was just our strategic focus at the time. We decided to cover the full spectrum of working capital of our clients, right? So we started as, hey, we get cheap money, we lend it digitally to clients. But then as we interacted with those clients and we recognized that they had a broad range of needs, we decided to cover the whole spectrum. And that includes payment, it includes reconciliation, it includes connection with the supplier, it includes a lot of other things, right? So we moved from, hey, how can I give you money, to how can I simplify your operations through money, right? And how can I make your financial operations simpler, smoother, and more effective and efficient through money. So lending is obviously at our core. We've got a broad range of financing solutions, starting from invoice financing, growth capital financing, instant payout or merchant cash advance. And the whole idea is saying, hey, put your financing management on autopilot mode through the platform and with a strong technological focus or platform-based focus rather than email exchange and sending invoices and this and that. And we will take care of the rest. That's pretty much what we do. So we started with e-commerce businesses just because there was a boom around e-commerce following COVID. But then e-commerce businesses are retailers. If they've got a working capital constraint or issue, there is high chances that other retailers have a similar problem, right? With a similar capital structure. And that's when we open up the market for a broader range of potential clients.
Yeah, and I may be mischaracterizing this a bit, but to me, it's got a lot of the good side of the embedded finance wave that we've been having as well. But where embedded finance tends to come from somebody who provided a service saying, well, I can embed some financing within that. People just want these problems solved for them. And you're kind of creating a same sort of experience as embedded finance, but starting from the finance side and then embedding out the services, expanding out the services.
Yeah. In fact, we use embedded finance partners for different parts of our value proposition, but we are also embedded ourselves in platforms that offer our service as embedded finance, right? So our focus is not so much on embed or not embed or who embeds where. It's about how can you combine existing technologies into a single platform that at the end of the day looks to simplify operations for the end client, right?
We've always said in the lending world, we love data. And sure, it's got data, but the data you're working with is a very different type of data now. And so it takes a different type of mindset. You're not saying, have you paid your last X number of months of invoices and doing a traditional credit check. You need to understand these businesses. You need to understand what the retailer is doing. So talk to me a little bit about that, if you don't mind. What do you look at when you make a decision to advance financing in this world? How is it different from a world of FICO scores or Dun & Bradstreet data on a corporate?
Yeah, that's spot on, right? I mean, the key is what data you look at, how you process it, how fast you process it, and how you come up with underwriting based on that data. Okay, and that's sort of the approach we have. The typical client that joins our platform will register and give basic data on their businesses and then connect as many accounts as possible. When I say accounts, I'm referring to open banking, PSPs, to your marketplaces if you've got, to your sales accounts. And in minutes, we build our own P&L and balance sheet from the data that we extract. So we can actually, often clients, they only reconcile balance sheets by the end of the year or maybe quarterly and so on. We have real-time balance sheets of our clients, and that is processed, paired obviously with credit reports from third parties, payment delays, information from suppliers, etc., to come up and say, okay, this is your working capital cycle, this is your reliability, this is how much we can lend and for what time horizon. And to the extent possible, that is all done through APIs from our different information providers, so that we can be as agile as possible in providing an answer.
Yeah, and what excites me so much about this space is if I think back to when I started my SME lending was seen as the dull side of the industry because there was so little data and the data you had was so old and it was very much more about an accounting principles than, data science. Whereas all of a sudden these APIs have just opened up this view into companies that is so big and so fast that it really is where all the excitement is happening now, with data that's far beyond now what's available in the consumer world. Sure, with open banking, we can start doing this with consumers, seeing consumers' incomings and outgoings. But yeah, definitely an interesting space for lenders to be exploring.
Yeah. And it also allows us to extract information on their behavior. And we got information on their invoices, and we can reconcile the time it goes between the invoices raised until the invoice is paid. So all those sort of things are also taken into account when we underwrite clients. Now, the next step for us, and that's what we're working on now, is how can you connect the second side of the equation, which is your suppliers or your commercial partners, right? Because at the end of the day, we've got so much information on the client, sometimes more than they even know about themselves, that if we can leverage that to make the client be more reliable at the eyes of the supplier and connect both sides of the transaction and cover the whole value chain of the same, well, obviously it makes a business for ourselves, but it also provides a lot of value to both the client and the supplier.
Ritmo is a Madrid-based fintech, but your clients aren't restricted to Spain by any means. So to what extent does cross-border lending impact your strategy and impact the business as a whole?
In our case, there's two aspects to that, right? The first is the international needs of our client. So our client can be a retailer based in France or in Mexico that has suppliers in the Southeast Asia or even within Europe or whatever, and that then goes and sells merchandise in Europe, in the US, Canada, Mexico, UK, whatever. But they need to report everything at the end of the day in their local currency to the authorities, and so that they can pay taxes in their local currency, right? So you can see if a single client can easily be exposed to, 4 or 5 different currencies at the same time. So that's one aspect of it. If the needs are multi-currency or cross-border, our lending solution needs to be cross-border, obviously, because we are trying to solve that pain. But then internally for ourselves, we are based in Spain. We've got our SPV in Luxembourg. We've got lending partners in the US, in the UK, and Europe. And we've got clients in LATAM, in the UK, and in Europe, right? So our own internal operation requires a lot of cross-border transactions for ourselves.
Yeah, and it's a situation that I would say even 10 years ago would have required a huge international bank. To try and envisage a small startup business taking on this sort of problem would have been impossible. And one of the ways it's certainly been helped is by the likes of Currencycloud, because it's not just you and I on the show today. We also have our friends from Currencycloud who we'll speak to in a minute. But before we do, perhaps you can sort of set us up a bit by talking me through what Currencycloud does for you in the space.
To put it simply, Currencycloud has allowed us to think of how can 10x or 20x look like rather than 10% growth, right? It moves from how can you really scale your financing operations through infrastructure and technology, which we didn't have and we could not develop ourselves. We've got our own internal complexities in our operations. And through Currencycloud, we've automated those operations. And at some point we said, well, if we are taking advantage of the service, why don't we pass it on to the benefit of our clients, right? And that's when they come in. Clients upload invoices on our platform, or the platform received invoices directly from the supplier. And once the client signs their debt acceptance, the Currencycloud infrastructure allows us to cover the full cycle of executing that lending contract, completing the payments, and then initiating and completing the repayments of the loan without any human interaction. So that means I think we've reduced our cost of operation, in no exaggeration, about 98%, just because we were doing about 40 or 50 operations per year 2 years ago. We are doing over 3,000 per month individual financing operations per month now. So you can imagine, and our operations team is smaller now than it was back then. And it's through the API and the payments infrastructure that Currencycloud offers. And then on the other side, our clients have needs by selling in different currencies and in different countries. And the collection of those sales in local currency is a huge challenge for them as well, which we can solve through Currencycloud, as they've got local collection capabilities in different currencies. And the fact that those local collection capabilities can be embedded on our platform, the client has a smooth experience by signing up on our platform. They see their accounts. They can connect those accounts to their payout platforms and collect the sales in local currency directly on their own accounts. So internal operations, accounts payable automation, and then account receivables automation as well.
Yeah, and I'm not going to mention my bank's name, but I can't even receive US dollar payments into my British account here at the moment, which is a wonderful way to welcome you to the show, Maggie Gemmill. You work with Ritmo, but also all the other LendTech and PayTech clients at Currencycloud. And when we first met, I thought I knew what Currencycloud did, but as I've learned more, I've seen I was missing a big piece of the picture. So if you don't mind, would you help bring me up to date with the full scope of what Currencycloud does and where lending fits in that picture?
Thanks, Brendan. Thanks so much for having me on the show, especially alongside a current client of ours. So in terms of what Currencycloud does, we're a platform for embedded cross-border money movement. What that means in sort of technical terms, I suppose, is that we're a suite of 77 modular APIs that allow banks, fintechs, and obviously lenders to move money around the world. At the moment, Currencycloud has over 500 customers, and this ranges from global tier one banks to seed-level startups. And we're really proud of the diverse nature of our customer base. And what the whole team is really focused on is how we can ensure that we've got the correct products and the correct people to enable our customers to be as successful as possible. So I work in the lending team and I'm responsible for new business sales. And Ritmo obviously is one of our clients. What we can really do for lenders is that we can give them access to our global banking connections via a single integration.
What sort of lenders are we talking about here? Is there sort of a niche?
Yeah, it's actually pretty broad. We've obviously got invoice finance lenders, buy now, pay later lenders, working capital lenders. Essentially, Currencycloud services anyone that's got a cross-border need. So that could be a lender that has a cross-border transaction within a loan cycle, or if there was a lender who was based in multiple jurisdictions and just wanted to manage all of their multi-currency needs via a single integration. You could have an invoice finance lender that needs to pay out to an SME business in the UK, but then receive a repayment back from a debtor in euros. So what Currencycloud can do is facilitate the local payout in GBP to their SME customer, and then receive a local collection back in euros from, let's say, France in this example, and then manage the eventual currency conversion back from euros to GBP once everything is reconciled on that lender's book.
Yeah, and I think initially that was the obvious part I had not thought of. Tend to perhaps get a bit fixated with the front end of lending. And while we do have increasingly a number of companies around the world doing cross-border lending, there's exponentially many more who lend just within their market, but who have suppliers and bank accounts they need to take money in and out of. When it comes to that, what is it about Currencycloud that is bringing these lenders to you.
I 100% agree with your full statement there. And I think just on the point you were making previously around SMEs being more globalized, that's absolutely why Currencycloud is winning in this space. What's really important for a lender is that they can pay out and collect in all of the currencies that their customers would need to operate in, so that they're giving their customers the best possible service, but also so that those payments and repayments can happen quickly. Lenders can sometimes take a long time to reconcile loan repayments. In terms of what attracts lenders to Currencycloud, I think it's our ability to give them access to new markets, whether that's lending in multiple currencies, as we've already discussed, or a lender that maybe wants to move to a new jurisdiction. And instead of actually setting up that banking infrastructure themselves, they can just use Currencycloud to manage banking connections around the world on their behalf. We've got a brilliant banking team here at Currencycloud who is managing all of those very, very complicated relationships. And then the lenders can obviously focus on what they do best, which is providing a wonderful service to their customers.
Yeah, and I think there's within that also some risk benefits that when we think about collecting money from people that owe it to us, we want it to be as easy as possible for them to send us our money. And you could see how they would pay the locals, but not bother with all the hoops you used to have to jump through to get money abroad. Whereas if you can create a simple process that links that up, you get rid of those hurdles. You make it just as easy to pay you as a foreigner as it would be to pay you as a local. That's going to ease up your collections processes.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Maggie, you've got a rare bird's eye view of this alternative lending spaces. So it would be remiss of me if I didn't take this opportunity just to pick your brain a bit. Are there any particular trends you're seeing that those of us in the broader industry should maybe be paying closer attention to?
Of course. So the biggest trend I've seen in the 18 months that I've been working at Currencycloud is just around traditional lenders essentially diversifying their product offering. So whether that's a prepaid card or a neobank proposition or perhaps an ARAP platform that wants to embed lending into their services as well, rather than a startup going to market with one product, they're actually going to market with multiple products to ensure that their customers have as much choice as possible. Obviously, we've seen the trend of cross-border increasing as well. We do live in a more globalized world. SMEs are doing business abroad more and more frequently, and they need to ensure that their lending provider can pay out and collect in as many currencies as possible. Another thing I'm seeing quite a bit as well is emerging markets. And I think this is something that is so interesting to watch. So, for example, Egypt and India are booming in terms of B2B lending. So I'm really, really looking forward to seeing what happens in those markets and the types of innovation that the companies that are setting up there are looking to do. And then the third thing I'm seeing is just the embedded lending market and how it's expanded and how it's continuing to expand over the next 5 to 10 years. I think I actually read an article recently from Oracle about how the embedded lending market is eventually going to be worth over $7 trillion in the next 10 years. So I think we're just going to see more and more startups doing really well because there's just still so much opportunity in this market, which I think is untapped, and really exciting to see Ritmo and everything that they're doing. And it's great to be kind of on the journey with them.
It's that area that had a vacuum of innovation, it feels like, for so long. And all of a sudden, all at once, we've had several technologies arrive in the field that give you this bird's eye view. But it means the incumbent banks don't necessarily have people employed with the skills to interpret that data. And it means startups can emerge and can take this data on without needing these massive operations we would have had in the past. And yeah, I'm just expecting a lot of innovation here as well. But as we said, Maggie, it's not just for those people on the cutting edge. Almost all lenders have some exposure to cross-border transactions. So if anyone listening would like to start that conversation, see what Currencycloud can do for them, what's a good way for them to get a hold of you or to learn more about Currencycloud's products and services?
Yes, absolutely. So our website is www.currencycloud.com. Anyone interested can also just reach out to me directly, Maggie Gemmill, and I can be found via LinkedIn. So yeah, we'd just love it if any lenders looking to integrate a cross-border payment solution into their platform should reach out to us, and the team over here can show you exactly what our suite of 77 modular APIs can do.
Great. And Jorge, I'm going to jump back to you to wrap up. You talked about Ritmo as both an embedder and someone being embedded. So there are lots of relationships potentially that people could be interested in discussing with you. If people wanted to learn more about Ritmo and its story, or people wanted to speak to you about getting involved, what's a good place for them to go?
Well, if it's a potential client looking for financing, they can register on our website, and within hours, they should have been contacted by someone in the team. If they want to discuss potential business collaborations or partnerships, I'm happy to help. My email is jorge@getritmo.com, but I'm also reachable through LinkedIn. Jorge Juttner is the name on LinkedIn. But I'm happy to help and distribute the request or the ask or the question to whomever is more relevant.
Excellent. And I'll put links to all of those for both of you in the show notes as well, if anyone wants to get the easy way to do that. Jorge, one last thing then as we look forward. You've seen and helped to create a tremendous amount of change and growth over the last 2 years with Ritmo. What is keeping your attention as you look ahead to, well, I guess we're getting late in the year, so as we look towards next year?
I think it's, from our perspective, to add as much value to clients as possible by covering as many parts of their financing or financial operations chain as possible, right? I think the cheap money is not on the table anymore. So playing on interest rate margin I don't think there's a lot of success on that front. Now, being able to capture the value from the whole financial operation, so paying, receiving, converting, lending, repaying, if you're able to cover that full spectrum, everything money related on a single platform, then you're in business. And that's what we're going to try to do and where we're going to continue to put focus.
Yeah, great words to close. And I think there are a lot of places within these businesses we can get real value, and you're showing that. So yeah, to both of you, to Jorge, to Maggie, thank you so much for joining me. Really happy to have heard from both of you.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was great to explain a little bit more about what we do and to hear a bit more about Ritmo's story as well.
Thank you, Brendan. And thank you, Maggie.
And thank you all for listening. Please do look for and follow the show on your favorite podcast platform, and share the updates widely on LinkedIn, where lending nerds are found in our largest concentration. Plus, send me a connection request while you're there. This show is written and recorded by myself, Brendan LaGrange, in Brighton, England. Show music is by I Am Wake, and you can find show notes and written transcripts at www.howtolendmoneytostrangers.show or just www.htlmts.show, and I'll see you again next Thursday.